But Utopia is kind of an interlocal entity that's already been created. They're proposing that a new separate interlocal entity be set up pursuant to an interlocal agreement. So unlike where we set up the wastewater treatment plant where it's no new entity, it's just the two cities with an agreement and a board, this actually would create another new entity. The interlocal agreement would actually create a new entity called the UIA, Utah Infrastructure Agency. That's what the first resolution is to create the entity. Now, at least 5 cities have already approved it, so the entity technically already exists, but just with those 5. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of point to, even if somebody else wants to participate in this new funding mechanism, you don't even technically need to pass this resolution or sign the agreement because the entity already exists. But it would just be more of a measure of we're supporting it if you pass it.
Does it give it, okay, here's my bottom line question. Does this give us any more power to do anything more with our situation that we're in with Utopia at this point?
No, and that's what I was getting to next. It actually cuts off your power and gives more power to the new entity. And you're actually waiving some of your current rights, and you're actually increasing your monetary obligation from $93,000 a year to some undetermined amount, but at least going up 10, 15, 20,000 a year more beyond that. That's not in the budget that you just passed earlier in the month. So that's and then the next document you see there is the big long financial document. Well, so that's the resolution that approves that agreement that creates the entity. The next one is the whole funding document, that whole indenture thing, and it's all financial language. But really, if you were to look at the main document, it's the service agreement. So if the entity's created and we want to participate in the funding, that 14 pages is really the meat. And even within that, the biggest part of the meat is pages 6 and 8. And that's what scares me a little bit, because when you look at that service agreement, pages 6 and 8, it says in section 3.3 that the obligation is absolute. The city's obligations shall be irrevocable, absolute, and unconditional, and shall not be affected by the construction, etc., and shall be made whether or not the improvements have been completed, are operable, etc. Which basically means that they don't have to do anything, and
you're obligated. And we're obligated.
And so an attorney was apparently, I see it, it's just so totally one-sided, and we're paying a lot more, sticking ourselves in deeper, waiving a lot of our prior rights. And normally there would be an accompanying set of provisions of saying, okay, because we're waiving and giving up and paying, here's what we get in return, and I'm not seeing that.
You don't get anything.
You know, to me, the decision's already been made. To me, I mean, it's time to stop the bleeding, cut our losses, and move on. Cut them loose.
Yeah, because if they're not willing to give us something,
well, I just see.
We can't just back up the money truck and pull the handle.
Well, no,
they're going to give you something called the shaft.
You know, that's. First of all, I think the mistake was made when this was taken on, even as good as it sounded and the promises that were made, that this was not the proper role of government. It was not a necessary thing. It's not something that we needed. It's not like you have to have power and sewer and water. This was something that we should never have entered into to begin with.
I'll tell you what I think. I think what's happening is we, the government, missed the boat the last time they asked for a raise, when they asked for the increase. And where we missed the boat was we didn't ask the AG or the county attorney to get in their business and see where the money was really going and why the first bunch quit. Something's wrong.
Well, my opinion is what went wrong is the federal government never followed through. Rural Utility Services with the Department of Agriculture didn't follow through. We lived up, or Utopia lived up to its part of the bargain, and then the federal government reneged on their agreement, did not follow through, which forced the whole project to fall apart, and they had to go out and get different financing. So I think if we've learned a couple of things from this, one thing is that you don't take federal money. That's why I'm totally pleased that we didn't have federal money on this wastewater project. It was state money, they're organized, it's run smoothly on the financing. Especially if cities 5,000 people or less, we can't take the same risks that a Brigham City or an Ogden can take, and maybe it's something that we shouldn't have taken this risk in. We don't have as much ability to deal with the risk.
One of the reasons we were allowed to come into this, and one of the reasons we were courted heavily to help with this, is to bring in those rural monies for, because we still have vast amounts of our city that are not covered by anything other than a little bit of Aaron. So
yeah, we made it possible for them to
we made it possible for them to get going, and then they dropped us at the top of a hat, or at the drop of a hat, and said, "Hey, we're going to put all our money into Tremont."
Well, they tried.
Motion that we reject Resolution 1010, authorizing the city to enter into an interlocal cooperative.
You said it.
Freudian slip right there.
Cooperative agreement to form the Utah Infrastructure Agency.
And 13.
Are we doing two together?
Yes, you can combine them.
Okay, and also that we reject Resolution 1013, authorizing the city to enter into a communication service contract with the Utah Infrastructure Agency.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by
I second
Councilman Cronin and seconded by Councilman Peterson. Any discussion before we go ahead and vote on it? Okay, Councilman Walker is aye. Councilman Satterthwaite.
Aye.
Councilman Cronin.
Yes.
Councilman Malin.
Yes.
And Councilman Peterson.
Yes.
Okay.
Even though we recognize that it could be very beneficial, but it is not the proper role of government. And my feeling now is they just keep promising us, that this is going to go through, that we're going to benefit from it. But in their own words, they told us even if we do this and it does go through, it's going to be 5 years before we see anything, and we're paying for it right along.
For 5 years to get it.
And the worst case scenario is they're going to need more money, or the whole thing could go belly up. My feeling is we cut our losses, we do not join this organization, we do not approve it, and we just back out and stop the bleeding right now and say, a mistake was made. We take the credit for that mistake that was made because we are the council, we do represent the city, even though it was done before us. And we move on. I think that's the smart thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do. And we make mistakes. We will always make mistakes, but we should correct them when we find them. And to me, this is just another promise that has no guarantees of anything other than it's going to cost us more money and we may not get a return on it. So that's where I stand on this issue.
Okay, Bill, what do you? Never mind. Boyd, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I think it's gone way out of control, and it started out with really good intent. It could have been something really beneficial. I take a little bit of difference with it's not government's role, because if that's true, we shouldn't be involved with RDA at all, should we? And giving incentives to businesses to help bring more businesses in. So there was an advantage to this that we saw originally, but it's way past. This new agreement does nothing for us. So I would say vote it down tonight.
Karen, anything else?
I agree that it was never and is not government's role to be involved in this